Hi, welcome. Come on in. Come on in. And thanks for joining my talk here at AzConf in India. But I'm not in India. Anyway, I'm joining you from rural Australia, of all places. And as you can see, we're going to talk about cloud, but more about that in just a minute, and testing. Did you check out the talk before on Architect using serverless to save costs? Pretty neat. You know, we all like saving money, right? So, first of all, I want to thank all of the organizers because these events are not simple to put on. I've organized an event in Melbourne in Australia for the past 10 years, and I know that having many people is quite the challenge. And if it isn't because you got to put them in the room, it's because you got to get them all online here and give them a good experience. So thank you all volunteers for putting this on. It's really cool. So, and then of course, while we're saying thank you, there we go. Get my mouse right. No. Thanks to all the sponsors. Now that we're at it, because we couldn't have done this. Well, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Microsoft and GitHub doing these events with us as sponsors, as partners. So thank you very much. And of course, we have and thanks to all the communities that are part of this. There's a lot of communities. I'm just looking at my screen here. I can see Women Who Code. They're part of DDD Melbourne as well. We have Elastic, we have .NET Foundation, we have Dear Azure, there's Chennai Azure. All of these wonderful communities, thank you very much for being part of this experience. And there's more! Yes, there are more communities because this is a community event and this is where we all come together. This is where we come and learn from each other. I like the community, that's why I'm here. I'm doing a presentation for the community. I want to be part of the community and learn as much as you want to. So, but who am I? Hi, my name is Lars Klint and I am a training architect. Is the title I've been giving for A Cloud Guru. And A Cloud Guru is a company that does training. We do cloud training. And that's what I do. I do a show every week on Azure. I do a lot of Azure stuff. I talk about how to get into cloud computing. And I'm a Microsoft MVP, which basically means that they give you a lot of stickers. Yeah, it does. It's an award that Microsoft gives for being part of the community and doing lots of stuff for the community, which is what I would do anyway. So thanks, Microsoft. That's me. And this is what I do when I'm at work. Yes, I get paid to have llamas on my head or something. But yeah, I do a lot of Azure stuff. Check it out online if you want to know more about Azure, if you want to have a weekly update rather, about what is new in Azure. That's the show that I do. So, okay, question. Normally I would ask this to all of you, but now that I can't see you, well, I'm just going to ask anyway. Who here are developers? Put your hand up. I can kind of see it. Yeah, okay. And you up the back. Yep. Put it up. Anyway. And then the next question would be people that have raised their hands. Who here test their code? And no, you're all liars. I know. We don't do testing, do we? That's something we do afterwards. The truth is that most developers don't do a lot of testing. It is an integral part of some companies and some processes, but for the most part, there is no testing, or very little testing. So that's why I'm here today. I want to show you how to test your cloud code and your cloud applications, because we need to. And it might seem a bit daunting because it's up there, but we'll figure it out, right? So I've got a bunch of different things in Azure that we can use to test in the cloud. And that's what I'm hoping that you will take some away from. Now, I have done a bit of research, or I've asked around my fellow developers about what they use for testing and what happens, and I started finding some books on this topic about the general trends in testing and the way that we sort of use testing in our everyday work, professional lives as software developers. And there was some absolute, there's some brilliant titles that came out of this, like this, Excuses for Not Writing Unit Tests. Yep, we've all read that one. Or Hoping This Works, because that happens a lot too. Sort of go, works on my machine, right? Or what about practicum test? practical testing, just click around, see what works and what breaks. That is the way. I had a manager that tested like that. Would just click on absolutely everything. And sure, it was a test and stuff. Yeah. And of course, there's commenting out failed tests. Yeah, I know. You've done it. You have. Don't deny it. I know. Yep. See, it works now. So, check these beautiful titles out if you need to. Maybe not. And then I did a survey of developers that do testing, and they had all read these books, but I managed to get some real signs out of it. So here's a pie chart of the developer testing approach that is very common in our industry. This is especially what do you mean testing? I get that all the time because we just don't get to it, right? We just don't get to it. But it is so important. So let's get into how we test for the cloud in myriad of ways, many, many different ways. So I've chosen some animals, and I just realized that tigers are they like a national emblem or animal in India? Anyway, I know tigers live in India, beautiful animals. Who tests PaaS anyway? So, platform as a service. You don't need to test that. That's someone else's job, right? Not quite. So the predominant PaaS service on Azure is App Services. And it's one of those services that we all use pretty much. And in case you didn't know, App Services actually runs a bunch of things. You can run many things on them. You can even run your Azure Functions on an App Service. So there's a really good ways to test your App Service, right? And I'm going to do that in this particular. I'm going to show you a demo, staging, and A/B testing. They're going to be the predominant two that I'm going to look at in this in this demo of testing. So let's get into it. So here is one I prepared earlier. I know, a little bit cheating, but I know they won't break. Yes. So apologies if it's a little bit small, but you'll get the drift. Hopefully most of you have seen the Azure portal, but this is what it looks like. This is where you can do everything in Azure. There are other ways. You can use the Azure CLI, you can use the PowerShell, anything, right? But hopefully you've seen this because this is supposed to be like a level 300 talk, right? We'll see if we get to that level. So, using Azure. So first of all, I'm just going to look at the screen here so I can narrate it. We go into my LlamaCam app service. So I have a LlamaCam website. I have llamas outside, llamaCam.com.au. That runs off here. This is the actual live site. Woo! So in here, there's something called deployment slots there on the left in the menu. And these are slots that you can set up one or many for your app service. Now, they're part of your app service plan. You don't pay anything extra for them. You can create any at any time. So in this case, we're just going to create one. So you go and you go add slot. And this will bring up a very basic menu on how to create a new slot, a new deployment. Called staging. So in this case, we're testing. So we're going to push stuff to staging. And then we copy all of the settings from the existing LlamaCam app there. And we click next or add. And that adds a deployment slot. It's that simple. Now we have two identical versions of that app service. It's the same. They're connected. But each of them have their own identity as such. So one of them called staging. And the other one's obviously production in this case. So if we click on the one that says staging, so I'll just go here and, we can swap them. Sorry, we'll get to that first. If you then have code that you want to test, you can swap the two. In an instance moment, you will have the staging code live and you can swap them that way. It's kind of hot swapping. There's almost no outage time at all. Unless someone is right in the middle of a session, then they might lose their session, but it's very, very rare. It is super fast. We're not going to do it in this case, but this is where you could say which slots you want to swap, because you can obviously have multiple. Now we go and we click on the actual staging slot. You can see it comes up just like any other app service. It has all of the same features, everything, even has its own URL. You can go directly to that staging deployment slot if you want to. That's a very, very neat way of testing your app service. And of course, this ties in all of your, CI/CD pipelines. Now, A/B testing. Most people don't realize this, but you can send some of the traffic to each of the deployment slots. So if I like type 30 here, it automatically changes the top one to 70. So in this case, 30% of the traffic will go to the staging website, or which might be A/B testing. So two almost identical websites, one being having, say the button's blue in one, there's green in the other, see which one people like the best. You can do a lot of that kind of A/B testing, and most people don't know this, and it's very, very cool because it's so simple. It's already there. Like the deployment slots are already there. So that's a very cool way of testing your app services in Azure. Very, very simple. It's very powerful as well. And of course, it's all in the same app service plan. You don't pay anything extra to create a lot of deployment slots. You can absolutely use it in your CI/CD. I would recommend doing it even. So if you have code that is built in a CI/CD kind of flow, or at least a CI flow, then at the end you push it to the staging. And you can always see if it works on staging because it is the same environment. It's running on Azure. And then when the time is right, you can either click the swap. You can also do that through scripts, through codes, ARM templates, whatever you favor. And you can then swap the two so that suddenly staging is in production. And then the old slot becomes the staging slot. Very, very, very neat feature. And again, check out the A/B features of it as well. So that's that. Okay. Now, if it fails, rebuild it. The beauty of the cloud, what we can in cloud computing is that we can essentially, and sometimes I get in trouble for saying this, but it's not my words, you can treat servers like cattle. As in, you can almost knock them down and get another one. Now, I apologize because I know in India, in some parts, cattle are very sacred, but it's nothing to do with that. It's just a way of terming it, that phrase. Now, the point being is that we have all these resources at our fingertips, right? We can spin up a new server when we need to, a new VM right when we need to. So we don't have this restriction of environment as such. We can just kind of spin up a new one. We don't have to sit with our laptop or our desktop or whatever. We can use the cloud to our benefit for that. Now, so I've just looked at PaaS. Now, more of an IaaS part of it, so infrastructure as a service, there's something called Dev Test Labs on Azure. And this is, it's almost like a team can have a pool of resources that everybody shares. So there's some very, very, very cool features about this. So you can, it says on the screen there, quickly provision environments. So you can have your own custom images that you just spin up within this Dev Test Lab. You share all of the resources on, in the pool that are there. So you can claim them and then you can put them back in the pool. I'll show you all this in a minute. You can have quotas and policies that are managed by your IT infrastructure so that you don't suddenly, it goes out of hand and you create 1,000 VMs, which also means that you can then operate within the confines of what production would look more like. Yeah. You can set automated shutdowns to minimize costs. And of course, you can build both Windows and Linux environments. I'll show you, there's a ton of different ways that you can build these things here. So, all right, so Dev Test Labs, it's another way of really taking the benefit of using cloud computing. So let's go into that. Here's another demo. Again, we're back in the portal. If we then go up to the top here, we just type dev test, and we'll then get the dev test argument. Again, apologies if it's a bit small, but you get the idea. As with anything else in Azure, click on add a new one. So we add a new dev test lab, and in here we give it a script that I created earlier, AzConf, and then we give it, obviously a name, and then that's it. That's all we have to do. That's where you create sort of the shell of the dev test lab, right? That's the shell of it. Pretty simple. Not much to write home about there. We've all done that before. It creates it for you. This takes a little while sometimes, but obviously, as a demo, I've just cut out all the middle bit here and just show you that that's how it goes. Just go to the resource and we'll have a look at it. So in here is the dev test lab resource. And you can see here, quickly, I'm going to add some. Let's just go into it. There's all the resources. There's a ton of them, right? All sorts of images for VMs. We're going to choose a Ubuntu VM. And here, we're going to add an artifact. An artifact is things that you install on this machine. Well, first we're just going to give it a virtual machine name. For this particular machine is an AzConfDev2020 and a password, a very, very secret password of 9 stars. We can choose the disk type, and then let's add a artifact. That was a bit quick, but that's Node.js I just added there. And that's all you have to do. Just click OK. And then put into the VM as part of creating it. It has Node.js installed. Pretty neat. So while that's installing, you can see there, that's generating, creating it. That takes a while, just like we're in the VM. But we now have a VM. That is, in this case, it's assigned to me because I created it. If it's within the policies of my account or my subscription or my account, my AAD account, if I go into that VM, you can see that you can look at the disks, the networks and everything that you can configure for this VM within the DevTest lab is here. And of course, you can use custom images as well. You can build up your own image for your particular environment or whatever it might be, and you can use that. You can spin that up over and over and over again. Very cool. And again, you can then claim it. So you claim a VM or you unclaim it. So if we unclaim it, we put it back in the pool. So all of my teammates, everybody that's on my team, go and claim this VM and use it themselves. And that is kind of neat because it means that there's a pool of VMs that are auto shut down. We don't just willy-nilly out of the blue. They're all managed in the, inside a particular account, the DevTest lab. You can see here how many different images there are, off the shelf, let alone the ones that you can add yourself. But it saves a ton of cache because, you have a dedicated pool of VMs. It keeps you out of trouble because you're not fiddling around with production anything. You don't necessarily, you don't accidentally use anything production. It's still going. That's how many there are. You use the VM inside of this DevTest lab, and it adheres to the policies of your company. It adheres to any quotas that might be. So you can only create so many. It's just a really neat way of collaborating around resources within a team, or for yourself for that matter. But it's a way that you can manage all of these different resources for your particular virtual machines that you need for this project. So that's DevTest Labs. Check it out. It's very, very cool. All right. So, any questions? I know. Anyway, it's just a YAML file. I hear this all the time, right? Why do we need to test? It's just a YAML file. And the truth is that YAML files are pretty simple. It's a declarative thing. You just tell it what you want, and it figures out how to get it to you. But you still need to test them. YAML files are becoming more and more popular, more and more predominant in everything, and especially around DevOps. Now, Azure DevOps right now is still the main way of publishing anything. It seems like it's kind of moving to GitHub or GitHub Actions, but we'll see what happens in that space. There's certainly a lot of movement, a lot of action, a lot of new things coming for GitHub and GitHub Actions, GitHub projects. So, but YAML seems to be behind all of it. And that's how you create a lot of things. It is done in YAML. I do a lot of home assistant stuff. So automating my farm, that's done in YAML. But you still need to be able to test it. And obviously we're talking about Azure here, not home automation. So in this case, we have Azure test plans. And these are a part of Azure DevOps. There's a testing part of it. So if you're not familiar with Azure DevOps, there's 5 different products within the same kind of platform. There's boards, there's code, there's artifacts, there's testing, there's publishing or pipelines. I think that was 5. And the testing part of it has test plans, Azure test plans, which is a way that you can define your testing within the project. But it's a little bit more than that. So you capture a lot of data around it. You can use it for web or desktop. Yeah, you can absolutely use it for desktop testing as well. And it has this traceability that goes end to end. So you get a really good sense of what's happening along the way. What is it that that comes out of it? What is the test case that you're doing? What is the logs that come out of it? Where is it going wrong? Where is it working? What are all the you can trace the whole way through. And these test plans aren't used very much. I see test cases used some in Azure DevOps, but the test plans are often kind of neglected or forgotten. Let's have a look. Maybe look at the demo. Yeah. Okay. So here's the demo I created earlier. Again, I'm now in Azure DevOps. This is in the test plans area, and I can now add a new test plan, or I can create one from existing or add existing tests to it. So here are a bunch of tests. They're just dummy data that I've conjured up. I'll show you in a minute how to do that. You test this, and you choose a bunch of test cases that you want to have inside of your test plan. So I'm going to add randomly the first 5 there, and this creates a test plan for me. So you can see that there are the tests in my test plan. Here's a conf test plan, and then each of these I can run from here. So here's the executes tab of it. I can actually mark one or more of these test cases. And I can then go to the up the top right, the drop down here, and I can say, run for desktop application or run for web. And that will run that test for me if I had an application that was to this. It would run it for me. And then it would trace everything. Everything would be connected to that test case through the test plan and the test. That's the traceability that I was talking about before. You can have charts, which your manager will love. You can have charts on almost anything that comes out of this thing. What's passed, what's not passed, and all these charts, as funny as we think it is as developers going, oh, look, a burn down chart or whatever, it does actually help knowing in terms of testing how many are failing, how many are passing, what's our rate of passing tests in development, and how far are we along to get this to the next step in this iteration done, or whatever it might be that the milestone is. So don't discount test plans. It takes a little bit of time to set up, I must admit, because you got to set all the tests up. If you have a QA team, this is generally what they will do. But just because you're a developer doesn't mean that you can't do this as well, right? This is the point where we go, it's someone else's problem. No. You own your code, right? So make sure that it's testable, and you can set up these tests as well. Now, I was talking about before just how to set up this dummy data. I found this really cool tool that was made by another MVP from memory, I think it is, the Azure DevOps Demo Generator .azurewebsites.net. And this, you log in with your Microsoft account, and you link it to your DevOps instance, and you could then choose from one of 7 different projects, I think it is, that will then create for you on your DevOps account. So it just populated with dummy data. So you'll have a board. They come in different shades and whatever. Some will have a GitHub repo that you can clone or fork. Some will have test cases like the one I just showed you. Some will have a whole board that shows the whole iteration part of it. Some will have code. Most of them will have code. It's just a really cool way of getting up really quickly and doing this for testing. Yes, we're talking about testing. So make a note of that website, which is a very beautiful URL, Azure DevOps Demo Generator .azurewebsites.net, and use it to your heart's content. It just populates your own DevOps with data. There's nothing more to it than that in terms of what you don't have to sign anything. It doesn't cost anything. So that's another neat tool. I quite like that one. Any questions? Yes, up the back. No, yes. This is a raccoon. Actually, he's here as well, from memory. See? There he is. Good question, though. Yeah, I like that. So we got test labs. Now, serverless. I work for a company that is quite happy about serverless, if I'm honest. We have created Serverless Conf, so we have a whole conference just on serverless. It hasn't run this year because of COVID, but I'm sure it'll come back in the future. And our entire platform, until just recently, was built on 100% serverless. We bought another company, now it isn't. But we just love serverless in all shapes and forms. But we still need to test it. So There is a way, of course, to test it. Azure Functions. I'm going to talk about Azure Functions. That's sort of the main serverless part of Azure. You know, there's also, we have Mesh, what's it called? Azure Mesh. I can't remember the name of it. But we have the other serverless products. There's logic apps as well. These are a bit harder to test, the logic apps, but we won't go into that. But for Azure Functions, we use Azure Functions. If you're not familiar with functions, go check them out. But in a nutshell, they just do one thing. So you don't have any servers. You don't have, well, you do have servers. That's the thing. But it's someone else's servers, right? You don't own any servers. When you just write the little function that runs. So it could be, for example, go into a database, check if any of the tickets are more than 2 hours old and mark them with a flag. You know, and it just does that and then it dies. And then maybe half an hour later, it runs again. The function runs again. And you could have infrastructure that has thousands of functions, thousands. And you need to make sure that they all work. And the best way to test these is in Visual Studio. Now, I don't have a demo of this, but I'm hoping that you are familiar with Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code for Azure development. Especially Visual Studio Code is this lightweight, highly developed, like it gets new features all the time. Product that is just so nimble and fantastic. It runs on everything. It runs on Mac, it runs on Linux, it runs on Windows. Or you can use Visual Studio, which is my main tool. I like the heavy, big, you know, fully featured tool. But each of them both can test functions. And you use the function test. I think in Visual Studio Code there's a, There's a package you can install that lets you test functions for that. In Visual Studio, you can choose your testing framework. You can use MS Test, which is built in, or NUnit, XUnit, but all of them can test your serverless functions. Now, the way that it works is that you've installed the serverless runtime on Visual Studio. It will allow you to run the function runtime locally, and you can then both run the function but also test it locally, and that's quite neat. So you don't have to go to the cloud. I know. And of course, make that part of your CI/CD pipeline as well in DevOps or whatever you use for that. But Visual Studio is the way to test Azure Functions. Absolutely. Now, it's someone else's computer. Yeah, I hear this a lot, and especially around cloud computing is that, well, I just put it up there. I just put my code in the cloud, and I don't own the computer. It's running on someone else's computer. What am I going to do? I just need to make sure the code is correct. Not quite. Sort of. Maybe. You still need that other component of it. And the one thing that I always focus on when I write any of this kind of cloud code is the performance, right? Because when you test it with your computer or from your computer to the cloud, it's just you. It's just one instance, one person, one execution of the function, one visitor to a website. Or if you get one of your team to do it, maybe there's 10. It's not many. If you're hoping it to be a successful or highly visible application or service, what if you have 1 million a day, right? So we need to make sure that our code can handle this. Yes, the cloud infrastructure definitely make a big part of that and makes something makes it much easier because they provide a lot of the scalability and the highly available services that we know, such as like Cosmos can scale, or VMs can scale from a scale set really quickly. But we still need to test our code for it. And there are 2 ways we can do this. Now, as I am recording this, I've just read that these particular tools are being deprecated. I'm like, oh no! But I still thought I should just tell you about it. Visual Studio 2017, I think, is going to be the last iteration that will support load testing. And you can do a lot of this as well directly from Azure DevOps. You can use the load testing. Actually, the load testing is in the Azure portal. You can go to your app service and you can create a load test in the tools there. Now, it is being deprecated, unfortunately, but the idea still stands. There are third-party tools that will allow you to load test things as well. When I was testing this just before, there is actually I think I used 10,000 users that would visit the website at the same time. You can see what happens, because it's not just about whether your service can serve it. It's also about, well, can your database code keep up? if you have a database at the back. It doesn't matter if you have 100 servers serving the customers. If there's 1 or 2 databases that has to serve the data and create and update and manage it, if they can't keep up, well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because it's still going to break. So the load testing in that sense is really, really important. The URL ping test is a little bit sort of similar, down the same path. It's sometimes used for DOS attacks, as in testing for it, but a lot of the services kind of take care of that for you. If you're familiar with Cloudflare, which is a free service, they also protect you against DDoS attacks for your web services, and they save you a lot of data because of their framework. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Cloudflare, but that's a service that's very cool. If you're not familiar with Cloudflare, go to cloudflare.com. I run all my websites through it. So that's performance testing, and you absolutely need to do this for your cloud computing as well. It's not just about whether you have enough servers. Like in the old days, 20 years ago when I started developing, it was, okay, how big a server do I buy for the data center to put in there? Because we own the hardware. Is as important now to do performance testing around your apps for different reasons. You don't own the hardware, but you need to use it in the best way possible. And don't forget, bigger VMs cost more money. So there's still money to save. If your code is optimized to run fast on little hardware, it is for all the better. Yep. All right. So next, Microsoft does the testing, right? Because they built the whole framework. So it's their problem, isn't it? It's their thing that they have to do the testing for it, I'm sure. No. So there is a shared responsibility model. Microsoft is responsible for the hardware and some of the networking, but the majority of it, especially around IaaS and PaaS, you are responsible for. Some of the SaaS services, they take a lot more responsibility for, but this shared responsibility principle means that you have to be responsible for part of your code as well. So yes, Microsoft does testing on the part that they're responsible for, but the other part of it you need to be responsible for. And for just that reason, there is a way of, you need to be able to test your architecture. And this is one of those concepts that is a little bit tricky to get your head around, because how do you test your architecture? We're used to testing apps. We test the function. It might be a serverless function. Like we're used to testing the code, not so much the architecture, perhaps. Often what we find as developers or as architects, software architects or IT architects, is that we come up with a plan and we think it's good, and we don't actually know if it works properly until we've launched the product, and that's a bit of a problem. So Microsoft knows about this, and that means that they've come up with different ways that we can tackle this. And the first way is the IaaS test. So they've made this very beautiful flowchart for you. I know. And again, you can see they're using Azure DevTest Labs. That is an absolute part of it. I cannot stress how cool that is, that tool. And a lot of people don't know about it. Even if you're a small team of 2 or 3, use the DevTest Labs. It's so easy to manage all your resources in there and keep an eye on costs and everything. But in this case, you can see that they have 2 different apps. It comes from Visual Studio. There's a build release agent. That's probably through, it might be Azure Pipelines. It might be Octopus Deploy. Who knows where that comes from. And then in this IaaS, you can see there's different. In the first instance, for the first app, SQL Server 2016, there's a VM, then there's a Azure Cache for Redis VM, and then there's the IaaS Dev VM. And of course, they run Application Insights on it. Application Insights is a must if you are a developer in the cloud. They give you so much data to drill into. If there's a problem or a bug, Application Insight has saved my bacon many times, because it just gives you an almost never-ending rabbit holes of debugging information to dig into. It's very, very cool. The next app, you can see there's, again, DevTest Labs that gives you a bunch of different servers. And guess this is the architecture for testing IaaS for developers, right? This is not a production architecture. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the architecture for testing these particular scenarios. And then the last scenario they have is a whole bunch of scale sets with VMs so these are different ways that you can test the same thing, more or less. Then we have the PaaS test, so platform as a service. The first was infrastructure as a service. In this case, if we're building a PaaS service, you can see there's so I'll just go back here. You can see this thing has the VMs, so it's IaaS. We control the VM and what it runs on it. The PaaS part of it is, so you have a VM that runs SQL. In Azure, you have Azure SQL as the PaaS service. So don't worry about the server. You just worry about the SQL part of it. The platform as a service, the SQL platform is what we worry about. So here's the architecture for testing that part of it. And this is the same setup. And again, go to all these links if you want, and you can check it out for yourself and see all Microsoft's comments and everything. But this is a typical setup for testing your PaaS architecture. We have microservices because that is a big part of it. Now, there are a lot of different ways of doing microservices. I am not an expert on microservices. There are other people that are way better at this, but essentially microservices means you have lots of services everywhere. And this is one of Microsoft's suggestions on how you set up a testing environment for this. Now, there's something that was called dev spaces as well for microservices in order to test your Kubernetes stuff. I think that's been deprecated. Oh, it's a little bit tricky. Even though I do Azure News every single week, it's still tricky to keep up with what is new, what is beta, what is public preview, what is live, what is generally available, what's being deprecated. Like, there's so much happening, right? So, yeah. I might be wrong on that, but I think dev spaces is maybe being deprecated. It's a service that's very cool. I've done a couple of presentations on it. I'm sure there's something better on the cards. Architecture ways of testing, or Microsoft's recommended architectures for testing various scenarios. Those are very good. I guess my point is here that we should go and we should follow what Azure says as well, what Microsoft has of guidelines. So yeah, and this is sort of the raised finger. I do through my travels. So I do training mostly, but I also do some consulting here and there, or I get questions or Twitter or whatever. I see this a lot. Testing is always a second-class citizen. It's so rare there's anything that being done with testing as an integral part of the first iteration. And yes, we might say, oh, you're sitting there going, yeah, but I do test-driven development. And yeah, okay, great. That's one way of doing it. And you might be doing that, but there's just so many that don't. Stop with the excuses, especially for cloud computing. There are so many ways that you can test your cloud computing. A lot of them are very little effort. A lot of them are, once you get it into your routine, it's just almost negligible how much time you need to use on it. Almost nothing. There are lots of ways of testing. Lots and lots and lots. And I would appreciate if you do it, because we need to test that code. Just make our code better, right? We always want to have the best code we can, and testing is definitely a part of it. So, that's a little bit short. I would normally take questions because I really, really enjoy questions. I can't obviously now because we're doing this online here. I do hope that you are having a great day and you're enjoying all of the talks that are in this event. Again, thank you so much to the organizers for putting this on. I just love being part of these events, even though if I'm here in a small room in front of a green screen, because that's obviously what I'm doing, talking to you about turtles or whatever it might be. I enjoy it. So thank you very much. Now, next up, don't go away, because the next session in this track is my mate, Tiago Costa. He's going to talk about supercharging your app service on a global scale. And we've just talked about app services, and Tiago is an absolute gun in Azure. I think he has all Azure certifications, I would imagine. But stick around. Give Tiago a hand. He'll be on very shortly after a short break. Thank you.